So just finished watching the Al Gore sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, Speaking Truth to Power. Hugely inspiring documentary when it comes out. If it hasn't come out where you are, I strongly urge you to go and see it.
People are seeing through it in much larger percentages now because there's a new participant in the discussion, Mother Nature. And I myself feared when he made that statement that it might do a lot of damage. I feared specifically that some other countries, and I had a few in mind, might use his decision as an excuse to pull out of the agreement themselves. But the exact opposite happened. The very next day, the entire rest of the world redoubled their commitment to the Paris Agreement, as if to say, we'll show you, Donald Trump. And in my country, the governors of our largest states, hundreds of mayors of cities, thousands of leaders in business, all stepped up to fill the gap and say, we are still in the Paris Agreement. And as a result, it now looks as if the U.S. will keep its commitments under the Paris Agreement, in spite of what Donald Trump tweets. And the first legal date on which the U.S. could actually leave the Paris Agreement, not entirely coincidentally, is actually the day after the next presidential election in 2020. A new.
What do you mean by that, Mr. Gore?
Yeah, a new president.
Don't. I'm going. Shall we all pray together?
Then or sooner could simply give 30 days notice and rejoin the agreement.
Ooh, now that's an exciting prospect, isn't it? We have so many questions coming in.
Yeah.
I do want to involve our viewers as much as we can. So, Helen Sanders asks, what can schools and children like my son Leo do to not make the same mistakes as our generation?
Great question. All these great social revolutions have featured an exceptionally prominent role for young people, with the energy and the passion, and of course they're often less encumbered by the barnacles of misconception that some of us gain over the years. The civil rights movement in my youth was certainly that way. Learn about it is the first thing, and this movie is a great way to do that. Take others to it, and then speak up. Young people in the civil rights movement actually engaged their parents and elders in conversations that featured pointed questions. Why is it legal to discriminate on the basis of skin color? And when their parents could not answer those questions, it contributed to the changing of the laws. Why, they might ask, are we using the sky as an open sewer, even though you know that it threatens my future? If those questions are asked by young people, and if they go farther and organize, then this can make a profound difference. And don't forget also that you have the opportunity, while young, to choose what skills and knowledge to acquire if you really want to be a part of the solutions here. I remember when I was 13 years old hearing President John F. Kennedy make the inspiring pledge to put a person on the moon and bring him back in 10 years, and I heard some older people say, oh, it's a waste of money, it's unwise, we probably won't be able to do it anyway. But 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, and in Houston, Texas, at NASA's Mission Control, there was a great cheer that went up. The average age of the systems engineers at Mission Control in that room was 26, which means, among other things, their average age when they heard that challenge was 18. They decided on a course of study and skill acquisition that will enable them to have the privilege of joining and achieving that mission. A lot of young people today are deciding that they want to be a part of solving this crisis.
Speaking about the climate change agreement in Paris and Trump's withdrawal, just going back to that, and it's a question that I wanted to ask you. just having seen the movie a couple of days ago, which put such a fire in my belly, I can't wait for you all to see it. This is a question from Darren Hall that mirrors mine. How do you stay so positive, considering big setbacks like the Trump administration withdrawing, and setbacks all the time? The climate change deniers having their say still. How do you maintain the hope, maintain the positivity, maintain the energy, and how do you stay positive?
I'm inspired by the millions of grassroots activists around the world who are the real heroes of this climate movement. They're doing the most extraordinary things. I have trainings all around the world. I'll tell you a quick story. At one of my recent trainings in the US, in Denver, Colorado, an 11-year-old girl came. And I said to my staff, "Are we sure? Is she old enough to do this?" I felt like the owner of an amusement park that said you have to be taller than this bar to ride. But she took copious notes for 3 days. 2 weeks later, I clicked on a video that was going viral on the internet, and here's the same 11-year-old girl going to the town hall meeting of her Republican congressman, standing up, getting the microphone, and just giving him hell on climate. And I thought, you go, girl. So I really am inspired by the people who are out there really working hard. And we don't have time for despair is just another form of denial. We've got work to do. The stakes are too high. And what a privilege it is to be alive in a moment when we together can decide whether or not human civilization has a bright and prosperous, healthy future, or alternatively, if we made the wrong decision, condemn future generations to consequences too horrible to imagine. So how could anyone who is seized of the urgency of solving this crisis feel tired? I get my energy from the mission itself, from the work, and from those who are out there doing it every day.
And with respect to this film, a decade after the first one, is it more of a call to arms in that regard? And Martin Hayfield asks, do you think this film will be the film that changes the world?
Well, I hope very much that it has a positive and powerful impact on those who see it. And by the way, to all of you here and to all of you in the 340 other theaters throughout the UK and Ireland who are watching right now, one of the things that you can do, if you're willing to do it, if you like this movie and feel it's worthwhile, what matters most in recommending movies today in this noisy media environment is what people hear from friends and people they know, word of mouth and social media. If after seeing this you think that it is important for others to see it, please consider spreading the word. The more people who see this movie, the more momentum the climate movement will gain. Environmental NGOs are organizing around this movie in the UK, in the US, and in other countries. It's going to be in 40 to 50 countries around the world, and we want it to add to that momentum. So I hope it will.
Do keep your questions coming in. We've gotten some fantastic questions so far. Remember to include the hashtag #AskAlGore. At DocsFactor wants to know, what is the one behavior you want people to urgently change?
Get involved in trying to influence the people who are elected to represent you. It's important to make the changes in the technologies you use, the products you buy, and all of that. But it's more important to change the laws and the policies. And even though many democracies, including my own, have been hacked by big money, even before Putin hacked American democracy, nevertheless, when people use strength in numbers, when you reach out with passion to collect others who agree with you and petition or speak or write in any way, contact to influence those who represent you and candidates asking for your support. That's how change can take place powerfully. The UK is at risk of not meeting its commitments under the Paris Agreement. I don't want to meddle in your, well, actually,
meddle
I do.
away, please,
Yeah.
please.
But I started to say I have enough to deal with in the U.S.
We need you.
But the difference between what your government does and what it fails to do can come down to how much they hear from the people. And there has to be a powerful expression to overbalance the lobbyists who are out there. They do claim the right to use the sky as their open sewer for free indefinitely, no matter the consequences for the rest of us. And that has to stop. But the only way it will stop sooner rather than later, stop in time to avoid the catastrophic consequences the scientists have been warning us about, is if enough people at the grassroots take the time and expend the energy and express the passion to let them know it is important to you. That's the main thing.
Let's talk about some more positive aspects of your journey, your 40-year journey, this passion for the environment that you've had. M. Cooksey wants to know, what do you think the most viable alternative to fossil fuels is? What excites you the most? What do you think is the most promising alternative?
I personally am most excited about the advances in solar energy. The cost has come down so quickly, it's quite incredible. There have been 3 contracts signed in different parts of the world in the last couple of months, in Abu Dhabi, in Chile, and in Arizona in the US, where unsubsidized electricity is contracted for at a rate less than half of the cost of electricity from burning fossil fuels. And that is a sign of things to come in more and more regions around the world. Wind is also the cheapest electricity source in the UK right now. The UK already gets more electricity from wind than from coal. And by the way, in the US, and I know it's true in many other places, but in the US right now, solar jobs are growing 17 times faster than other jobs in the economy. The single fastest growing job is wind turbine technician. So we face an economic challenge in the world of weak secular demand. We need a global project to put millions of people to work. We have a project. We need to convert to renewable energy, electric vehicles, battery technology, sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, sustainable fishing. We can do it. We need to retrofit buildings, residential, commercial, and industrial, to stop the waste of energy, which is 25% of the problem. And all of those things create jobs that can't be outsourced to other countries because they're in every community. So we can solve this crisis and strengthen our sustainable economy at the same time. Look, we are in the early stages of a global sustainability revolution. It has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution. The scientists and engineers are giving us the ability to manage molecules and atoms comparable to what we learned in the information sector about how to manage bits of information. And there's a massive retooling of business and industry going on all around the world. And every human endeavor now is becoming far more efficient and less wasteful, producing less emissions that contribute to this crisis. And this is also the biggest commercial and business opportunity in the history of human civilization. So we need to get on with it. We can solve multiple problems at the same time.
We touched on this when you mentioned India, and certainly what you will see in the documentary about the negotiations you took part in were fascinating. Francis Pimenta asked, how confident are you about the potential for low-income countries to leapfrog to low-carbon technologies? they do have this argument that, right, as developed countries, we have had our way and had our heyday. It's their turn to fast track to that level with fossil fuels, and then they'll be ready for renewables. That simply isn't acceptable anymore, is it?
Well, the analogy between their situation now and the situation of the United Kingdom and North America and Europe 150 years ago, the analogy is not quite exact, because if 150 years ago we had available to us these exciting new technologies of the 21st century that didn't pollute our cities and make our air unbreathable and cause so many deaths, we would have chosen the clean energy back then. And right now, there is a kind of a political crisis in some parts of countries like China and India, as the new members of the middle class there become more aware of how many deaths are caused by the choking air pollution. And there is pressure to cut the co-pollutants that also come with the global warming pollution. And the analogy you will see to cell phones, we have this elaborate landline telephone technology. I don't know about you, but I don't even answer my landline telephone anymore because it's always a telemarketer. And I've got my iPhone with me. If we could leapfrog, we would. They have that opportunity, and they are doing it. The same is true for energy systems. There are as many people in India who have no electricity at all as almost the entire population of the United States of America. Are they really going to recreate the old, outdated electricity infrastructure that we relied on for so long? We wouldn't if we were doing it again. We would do the decentralized, distributed energy systems that make more sense economically as well as environmentally. So they are making this choice, and you will see some examples in the movie. It's very exciting. There are many countries in the developing regions that are just really going all out to install solar panels and take advantage of it.
We're nearly out of time, can you believe it? But I want to ask you one more question.
All right.
This is from @WeAreTea, and she asks, do you look forward to the future for you and your family? And may I just add as well, what would be the one message you would like to leave with our viewers?
I do look forward to the future. I have 4 children, I have 4 grandchildren, I have a 5th on the way, a 5th grandchild on the way. I really connect my own passion for the impact this is potentially going to have on the next generation to those I know and love so deeply. And I'm very positive and optimistic, but my optimism, I must tell you, is premised on the assumption that the movement we now have to solve this climate crisis will continue and will build and will grow. I believe it will. A famous economist, now deceased Rudy Dornbush, once said, "Things take longer to happen than you think they will. And then they happen much faster than you thought they could." We've seen that in other movements. If somebody had told me even 5 years ago that in the year 2017 gay marriage would be fully legal in all 50 US states, accepted, honored, and celebrated by 2/3 of the American people, I would have said, well, I sure hope so, but I think you're being wildly unrealistic and naive. But it happened because the conversation was won, because brave gay and lesbian people decided to express who they were, and their friends and coworkers said, "Oh, Billy? Oh, okay, I get it now." And people decided en masse, if God created people this way or that way, God could not have intended they'd be persecuted for the rest of their lives. And what the hell does it matter what kind of person you fall in love with? Let's get on with it and come together. That's an example of things taking a long time, but then changing suddenly. And the climate movement is right at that tipping point right now.
And you will certainly feel it when you watch this documentary. If you want to be part of the conversation after you watch this film this evening, please join in with the hashtag #BeInconvenient, and lots of information on the website to just fire you up and get you involved in the same way that I want to be involved after watching it. It's time to watch the most important documentary you will see this year. All that is left for me to do is to thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time. We know your time, you're a very busy man. And to thank you again for your continued passion and dedication in fighting for the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, the former Vice President, Al Gore.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the movie.
So just finished watching the Al Gore sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, Speaking Truth to Power. Hugely inspiring documentary. When it comes out, if it hasn't come out where you are, I strongly urge you to go and see it. It's not just some of the things that are rapidly happening now with the warming of our oceans and how that's switching these weather events we're having to be stronger and more intense in the dumping of rain, these rain bombs. There's a message there of hope, and certainly one of the strongest messages that came out was around solar and the pure economic shifts, which mean it's now highly profitable to roll out solar in a city. And one of the examples Al Gore gave was to visit Texas, to a little city who has gone 100% renewable, even though it's a Republican mayor, it's a Republican state, because it's cheaper. And the call is to get every city to go renewable. Also, a lot of background was given on the Paris Climate Treaty, the 2015 Accord, where over 170 countries came to an agreement and decided to agree to get climate temperature increases back down to zero in the second half of the 21st century. One of the things that stood in the way of that was India not wanting to put 300 million people who don't have energy now behind, given that developed countries already had access to coal and they didn't. And this truly amazing feat happened where Al Gore talked to a CEO of a company. I won't give it all away, but as a result of those conversations, India came on board. And that's really the takeaway for me from this film, is that through taking action and doing things to create a bigger conversation around this, we can make a positive change. Certainly for me, that's going to be around evangelizing this complex problem in a simple way and showcasing the leaders of industry and creating a competitive advantage for them economically through branding, through marketing to their customers, to help their competitors then pick up the ball, not wanting to be left behind. So Al Gore is certainly doing it on a massive state and country level. I want to do it more on a corporate and enterprise level. So yeah, awesome to go and see that. Very inspired, particularly with the half an hour talk prior to it. I'll put that up online with this so you guys get to see it, even though you probably weren't supposed to record it. But it is about being inconvenient, and I thought it was worth the risk to record in the theatre what Al was saying. If you've got any questions or you want to be part of this, get in touch. I'm looking to build a bigger network around this. And yeah, it's going to be my focus for some time. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching this little episode, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good night. Oh, and Joseph, if you're watching, the Lego store is just here. It's closed, but now that I know where it is, I can come and have a look and see if I can find something for you. Joseph, I think you would like this shop. It is the Kingdom of Sweets. How cool is that? Like, everything in here is sweets. Let's look at the sweets here. These ones. We've got all these ones here. Everywhere. I'm not buying any. If you're over here, we could buy some. But you're not. You should come over here.